Alrighty, everyone, welcome. Good evening. My name is Carlos Jimenez. I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Bellarmine College Prep, and I'm super excited to welcome you to my talk that I'm going to give. It's called Breaking with Tradition, the Process of Building Culturally Relevant Catholic Schools. And this is for the Ignatian Family Teach-In for Justice. So bear with me. This is the first time that I do a recording like this, so I hope we have a good experience. I'm going to try to make this as engaging as possible. Thank you again. So let's get started. As we do in our most of our schools, I'm assuming we'll start with a prayer. This is a prayer that was shared recently with me that I love. And we're gonna say it together. Lord, make me a channel of disturbance. Where there is apathy, let me provoke. Where there is compliance, let me bring questioning. Where there is silence, may I be a voice. Where there's too much comfort and too little action, grant disruption. Where there are doors closed and hearts locked, grant the willingness to listen. When laws dictate and pain is overlooked, when tradition speaks louder than need, grant that I may seek rather to do justice than to talk about it. Disturb us, O Lord, to be with as well as for the alienated, to love the unlovable as well as the lovely. Lord, make me a channel of disturbance. Amen. San Ignatius of Loyola, pray for us. Okay. And I'm going to have to move this thing around a little bit, I guess. But okay, here we go. Let's continue. Very appropriate to this prayer for the topic that we're going to cover right now. Okay. So, again, why is this relevant? Let's center ourselves in the moment that we have been living through in the past few months, 6 months or so. Of course, a lot of these things have ramifications and historical connections that go beyond the last 6 months or recent years. They have deeper roots. But let's see what we have been experiencing. Yes, COVID-19, right? And the effects it's had on, the world, our communities, specifically also xenophobia against Asian people, right? People that are perceived as being conduits of the virus. Of course, the effects in our community are especially our most disenfranchised, marginalized, are people who are being affected by the lack of work, the not being able to provide for their families. This is something that has been happening. In recent years and months, the whole issue about defending DACA and the recent Supreme Court decision. Again, also a Supreme Court decision recently about the rights of LGBTQ folks, which again is an ongoing challenge and an ongoing, as we seek for justice. This is another topic that has been and continues to be really relevant for us. And of course, the tragic deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and countless other Black people that have been killed brutally by police violence, affected by systemic racism, the Black Lives Matter movement that has gained a lot of momentum and notoriety in the last few months and continues to be, again, pushing us to think about how we can achieve a greater justice for our Black brothers and sisters in our communities and in our country. So this is, again, centering in the moment that we're living through. So then what is at stake for us in our Catholic Jesuit schools? I would argue, a lot of people argue, the soul of the country and by also the soul of our schools. This is the moment that we're living in, we're at a crossroads, a very important moment. Our communities, our students, our faculty, our parents, and many other people in our country are living through multiple pandemics at the same time. racism, COVID, poverty. There's just the weight can be heavy. And again, all these things that we've been talking about raises existential questions for us in our Catholic and Jesuit schools. What is the role of Catholic schools in resisting or perpetuating systemic inequities? Are we forming youth to be chaplains of empire or prophets of resistance? And I'm taking the words from Reverend Michael Ray Matthews, who, at least I think he's the one that came up with that. I love that phrase, chaplains of empire or prophets of resistance. Who belongs and who is marginalized in our communities? Do our schools reflect the beautiful diversity of the kingdom of God? Our brothers and sisters that we in throughout our world, the human race. Is our curriculum inclusive and aimed at raising often ignored perspectives? So again, looking at academics, our programming, and our schools. Are we meeting the needs of all of our students, faculty, and parents as we become more attuned about the experiences of all the different people in our communities, in our schools? Are we meeting those needs? And again, going back to what is at stake, not engaging in these dialogue and in these questions, introspection, thinking about these things that will lead to systemic changes that our community needs. If we don't do that and we don't get to those changes that are so necessary, then we are not providing the education, the best education that we could. We're actually we're doing them our students, our community a disservice, rather than really upholding our mission as Catholic and Jesuit schools. And again, for me, why is this important? Why do I talk about these things? Why do I care so much about this? Well, as it says down there, I'm a product of Jesuit education, and I'm gonna have some images here. I'm gonna have to move this around a little bit, but this is me at 12 or 13 years old, and I'm originally from Guadalajara in Mexico. So I went to the Jesuit school in Guadalajara, Instituto de Ciencias. So I'm in first grade of secondary school. So it would be the equivalent of 7th grade. And that's me around that time. So I started my formation in Catholic schools and Jesuit schools very young. A few years later, I moved with my family to San Jose, and I transferred from El Instituto de Ciencias to Bellarmine, where I now work. So this is me in my senior year. Later on, I went to Santa Clara University, just down the street. I think this is my junior or senior year. I don't recall. So I'm about 21, 22 years old. And currently, so in my formation, academic formation, I am getting my PhD at the University of San Francisco. So secondary school, high school, undergrad, and now grad school in different Jesuit ministries. So yes, I'm a product of Jesuit education. And then most of my experience in the professional world has also been connected to Jesuit schools. Right after college, I worked for 4 years at Sacred Heart Nativity School in San Jose. And then now for the last 8 years at Bellarmine College Prep. So again, for me, this is very personal. This is for various reasons. I believe so strongly. I was shaped by Jesuit education. I love it. And that's why I'm here, So this is why I care. So by thinking about the importance that Jesuit education has and the impact that it can have that it had on me and has on other communities, I have this desire, this goal for it to be better, for it to be the best, as much aligned as possible. Moving on. So again, this work, thinking about culturally relevant schools, diversity, equity, and inclusion, anti-racism, it is deeply tied to the core identity and values of Catholic schools and Jesuit schools. So we start with Catholic social teaching. It teaches us, among other things, to care about solidarity, the dignity of the human person, caring about the common good, right? So all those things are core tenets of Catholic social teaching. And for Jesuit schools, the universal apostolic preferences, the Society of Jesus, talking about walking with the excluded, caring for a common home, journeying with the youth, all these things are part of who we are as Catholic and Jesuit institutions. Even continuing, people, important figures in the church and in our schools talk about, again, the importance of this work. Here's Pope Francis, and I won't read the whole thing, but talking about the importance of dialogue and encounter by people from different, in this case was different faiths, but we could apply it to different ethnic backgrounds, nationalities, races. Encounter marked by friendship and respect. The importance of that to dissipate fear and distrust. We have Pedro Arrupe, right? The 28th Superior General and one of the most important figures in recent figures in Jesuit for the Society of Jesus and Jesuit education in general, talking about the importance of us as institutions forming men and women for and with others, and that if if that formation cannot even conceive love of God, which does not include love for the least of our neighbors, then we're missing something. Then it's a farce, you know. So Pedro Arrupe talking about that. And more recently, Father Brian Massengale, someone that I really look up to and love what he talks about, talking about the church's engagement with racism and inequities that are usually centered around not disturbing white folks, and that often the comfort of white Catholics outweighs the terror and the weight of the inequities that people of color experience, right? Catholics of color. So again, we talk about these things that are important. Again, the basic core identity and values of the church, some of the figures that really speak about the importance of us doing this work and caring about these important issues. And then we get to, and this is just some demographic data from Jesuit schools that don't have it from other types of Catholic schools. But even though that's such important, those values, we have those figures talking about the importance of this work. If we look at, this is from 2019, and we look at student ethnic diversity, administrator ethnic diversity. So this is the U.S. West, U.S. Midwest, East and South, Central and Southern. And if you look at it, just in terms of who is in our schools, both as students, as faculty members, staff, and administrators, we see a large gap, right? We see that we continue to be predominantly white institutions. In some cases, we have made great strides, great progress. In others, we're still lacking, right? So again, just in the basic question of who is in our schools, who belongs, who's admitted, who's granted access, we have a lot of work to do. But then even for the ones who are there, who make it to our schools, we're going to talk about their experience, right? And again, in this case, I'm going to focus on Bellarmine, right? Because I experienced it as a student and now for the last 8 years as a faculty member. So I'm going to share with you just the journey that has happened in recent years. And again, how we have addressed these questions, it's ongoing. We haven't solved it. We're not done. It's going to be ongoing and we're still learning. But I would like to share, again, some of the steps that we've taken. And hopefully there's things that would apply to your context. Others maybe not, but I'm going to share this with you. So we know this, again, from my personal experience, from different alumni, from different, Bellarmine was founded in 1851. So there's alumni from, the 50s, the 60s, early 2000s, so we have a wide range of alumni. And we hear, through various, anecdotally, through surveys, etc., and even current students, right? That there's a certain duality of the experience of our school. Our school is wonderful, it's amazing. We provide an amazing education, great, our facilities are amazing, our sports, our co-curricular activities, service, immersion trips, our campus ministry, it's wonderful. Again, had a deep impact on me, and that's why I'm here. Yet we hear that there's, for many students and even faculty members and parents, there's certain dissonance about being in this space, right? And that dissonance revolves around that for many, Bellarmine can be a place of liberation, right? Using very Catholic and Jesuit lingo, but also a place of marginalization at the same time for many of us, right? Many students, faculty, and parents. That there's wonderful aspects of it that, in terms of, again, the growth, the intellectual knowledge, the conscious racing, etc. But then there's also experiences that particularly our faculty members, students, and parents from marginalized communities, underrepresented backgrounds, often have a different experience of Bellarmine, right? So then how do we wrestle with that? How do we talk about this dissonance? How do we make more the experience that our community will have in general, every member of our community, is going to be more geared towards liberation as opposed to marginalization? So a little bit of the history. This is going to be brief. I'm not really going to talk about many things, but just to give you a sense of what's been Bellarmine's journey in terms of equity work, racial justice, etc. In 1979, this program called the Minority Scholarship Program started to really start doing more outreach to underserved communities, and it later was rebranded the BUILD program in 96, Bellarmine United in Leadership and Diversity. The 80s saw the creation of CLCs around ethnic identity, what we now call affinity groups. They started as Christian life communities. La Raza Unida, Black Student Union, the Asian Society. Currently now we have at Bellarmine about 14 affinity groups, right? But that work started in the 80s, okay? Then we get to 1996, which was the official creation of the diversity director position. That's what it was called at the beginning, and it has evolved. Okay, and then we go to 2001. The outreach program gets started, and again, that's the focus is at that moment to bring low-income Latino students, and again, this is based on the demographics of San Jose. From the east side of San Jose, how do we start creating more pathways for Latino students from those areas that wouldn't traditionally have access to our school to start coming here? We jump to, again, a lot more things happen, but some key events. In the 2017-2018 school year, we did our first summit on human dignity, understanding race in the 21st century. And I'm going to talk more about that. But that was a key moment for our community. And out of that, there's many other things that happened, but the following year, the formation of the Equity and Inclusion Committee, that again, I'm going to talk about that. So again, giving you a little bit of a sense of where has Bellarmine, where did we come from, and where are we headed? So again, briefly, the summit on race, understanding race in the 21st century. Again, this was a year-long exploration of the topic of race and racism and the effects on our nation, our city, our state, our community here at Bellarmine. And we did a lot of things that I could talk about this for an hour or so, but as you can see from the images, there were a lot of things that happened, things like even us starting to grounding our community on how we can have difficult conversations. So we came up with the 7 principles of constructive dialogue. We created them as a community and then employed them throughout the summit. We had keynote speakers like Vieta Nguyen, who's a graduate of Bellarmine and a acclaimed Pulitzer Prize winner, author, and professor, who came and talked about his experience both as a student in the late 80s, coming from Vietnam, and and many other topics connected to again, equity and inclusion. We brought speakers that had one-on-one or small group conversations with our students. Even our theater department got on board, and our one of our plays that year focused on race. We had other events. At the time, the Trump administration was talking about ending the DACA program. We had, the students really felt moved to have a demonstration against that, education, not deportation. We had student-led. And something else that happened as a result that, again, was difficult but important for our community to engage in those conversations. Several members of our football team, varsity football team, deciding to take a knee to talk about their racial injustices, both at Bellarmine and in our community, in particular police brutality against minority populations. All this happened within that year. So there was a lot of things going on. I'm going to show you quickly, not everything, but I'm going to show you briefly a short video about some of the things that we did. Okay, so this is part of the summit was providing spaces for students to share their experiences and tell their stories. So just a few minutes, I'm going to play this for you.
As a senior, I've been able to experience a lot of what Bellarmine has to offer. What Bellarmine does is allows every student to find their own voice, find their own path, what they want to do.
And as a Hindu who is coming in with an entirely set of values, and being able to see the commonalities between what Jesus preaches and what I'm reading in any given text, I think that was really important for me.
I feel like I'm not just identified based off of what my skin is and what my heritage is. I could do something that's completely different, and I want to be able to have that freedom. But I feel like when I'm characterized in that specific light, that freedom gets taken away from me.
We all have those moments where someone says an offhanded racial joke, or there's a racial stereotype thrown around. I mean, that happens all the time. Microaggressions, we don't intentionally mean it.
I think microaggressions is when someone who's good intentioned and has the right ideological concept of respecting others does something that might go against that.
And I think that's the most difficult sort of racism to weed out.
And even though the person is well intentioned, it does create a problem.
It's almost as ingrained into our society that it's okay and normal to say those things.
A lot of times people have preconceived ideas about a certain race, and a lot of it is cultivated by what you see on TV and what you see in the media.
I think your identity as a person is really separate from where you come from and what your background is, and obviously that plays a role into who you think you are, but you can be so many other things than your race.
I remember in my first 2 years I was part of the basketball team.
I'm going to pause there. Again, there's a lot of, this is in our website or our YouTube channel. I really suggest you look at it. They're wonderful, moving, difficult, but the students talk very candidly and openly about their experiences. So that was part of it. We ended with this inaugural Unity Assembly. So it was about learning, understanding, being pushed to act, being called to act, but also celebrating who we are as a community. So it was all this connection. Again, the speakers, the movies that we watched, the books that we read, and then we had our first Unity Assembly that I'm going to, again, show you just a few minutes.
up for your colors. Ready the people, a new day has just begun, and I wear my colors on my back. We created equal, one race and that's human. Can't wait till they all see that. Say, oh, can't you taste the feeling? Say, oh, we all together singing. Look how far we come now. There's beauty in our unity we found. I'm ready. We still got a new way. Look how far we come now. Hands up for your colors.
Okay, I'm gonna pause there. So again, wonderful. It was the first time we did anything like that, and the students were very excited about sharing. We had our Filipino Student Association, Indian Student Coalition, Latino Student Union, Black Student Union. Some faculty members participated as well. Chinese culture community. It was really, really wonderful for our community. Again, the difficult parts, the difficult conversations, the introspection, but also the celebration that was happening hand in hand. So then the question was, how do we continue this important work after, again, not only just the summit, but all the other work that had been happening as well? So a few things happened that were wonderful, that really helped in this regard. Unity Council wasn't created as a result, was created maybe a year or so before the summit, which is basically a group of students from various affinity groups that gathered together and, plan events like the Unity Assembly, conversations. They participated as breakout leaders in the summit, they created their own workshops. So again, this idea of students from different backgrounds collaborating and working together. The creation of the Equity and Inclusion Committee. This is kind of like the first, few members, and then it started growing, faculty and staff members. And then again, this is not the creation of it. The Community Engagement Committee, which is a parent group that had been active for a few years, but also kind of like bringing them in and saying, hey, how do we align our work? And again, mostly the role of the Community Engagement Committee is creating spaces and opportunities for for parents, families from different backgrounds, religions, to say, come to our school, you're welcome, you belong here. Again, cultural celebrations, many, what you see here in this picture was the Unity Picnic that happened in 2019, the first one. And we had a great turnout. Again, basically saying, everyone, this is Bellarmine. We're a diverse community. So please come and bring a dish, share with us. And it was wonderful. A lot of people came. So then I want to focus specifically on the Equity and Inclusion Committee, Equity and Inclusion Committee. Really quickly, as you can see, it's a group of faculty and staff members committed to upholding Bellarmine's Jesuit mission of aiming to free its community, to confront honestly the social injustices of racism, marginalization, sexism, and religious intolerance. So this was the faculty members and helping us basically implement needed institutional changes. So again, saying it's not just the job of the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, not just one person's job. This is a collective job, and supporting the work that comes out from this office. Again, quickly, the DEI plus A, this is new, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion plus Anti-Racism framework that you might have seen also. You will see in other presentations throughout the teach-in. Internal, interpersonal, and institutional. The internal geared towards the growth that happens within the individual, right? The interpersonal is how we learn to engage with one another across differences, across difficult or complex conversations about power, race, sexism, etc., but at that towards more empowerment, right? And that is achieved through more professional development and opportunities. And finally, how all that would lead to creating a shared vision that would lead to changes across the campus, not just one-offs, not things that you can check off, but actually systemic changes, right? So that's the framework. This is, again, something that I'll mention briefly, just the work of Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, the culturally relevant pedagogy. This idea that, you can have a model that student achievement happens when, we're affirming cultural identity, developing critical perspectives, and challenging inequities that schools and other institutions often perpetuate. So again, this is part of the research, part of the focus that is helping guide our work, among other things, many other things. But culturally relevant pedagogy is one of them. And then really quickly, what happened after the summit? So we created a plan, 10 years, that's the goal. So data gathering, then analyzing the data and starting to create a plan. And then throughout the remaining 8 years, starting to implement, evaluate, and again, when the Universal Apostolic Preferences came out, how do we align our work to that? And Catholic social teaching and other things. So again, this is the step-by-step plan that we established. So the year one, we did, again, it was data gathering. So we did, some of you I know have done this, the AIM survey, right, from the National Association of Independent Schools. Here's the AIM survey. We did both the AIM survey and the self-assessment focus group. So the focus groups are kind of like small groups from our community that talk about all these topics that you see here, and the AIM survey from all these constituents that form part of our community. So again, gathering data, getting a sense of the climate of our school's health in terms of equity and inclusion. So after we got that data, EIC, the Equity and Inclusion Committee members, again, collecting the data, starting to analyze it, creating action plans based on what we got, what were the tendencies that we saw from the data, and helping us then create a strategic plan, right? So again, we didn't have a DEI strategic plan before, so we're kind of just, we're all learning as we go. And even the plan, I would say, is not even over yet. It's a living document. We have created something that is helping us guide our work instead of just saying like, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? More having an actual plan. And again, using an instrument like the AIM survey and the focus groups from NAIS, that was really useful. So again, now we're in year 3. We're just starting, and year 3 to, until we get to the 10-year mark, start implementing it. Let's create subcommittees with benchmarks and ways that we can actually keep ourselves accountable. And I'm going to talk about some of these areas that we're focusing on. And again, the idea is of having a plan, a way that we can actually start bringing these systemic changes that our community needs. And again, we are hearing it from all the different people that make our community. So from that, currently the focus areas that we are again focusing on is curriculum and instruction, faculty, staff, administrator recruitment and retention, professional development and training, community partnerships and engagement. That's mostly alumni, parents, and other community-based organizations around our community, around Bellarmine and San Jose. And creating a welcoming, safe, inclusive, and equitable school community, right? So again, each one of those are the focus areas, and each one has particular goals. And again, benchmarks and ways that we're saying, hey, it's again systemic. That's why we have a plan, okay? And again, I'm gonna finish here. I'm only showing you the way that we have approached it, and what are now that that I'm here sharing the experience of Bellarmine, of the work that we've done. What are some of the key lessons that I learned that I want to share with you? And again, some of those you might say might be already evident to you. the DEI plus anti-racism work is aligned with Catholic Jesuit identity and mission. It's easy. It's not. We're not trying to bring in something extra, something that is not already in the founding documents. It's not in already has been said by all these important figures in our history, past and current. So it's part of who we are as Catholic and Jesuit institutions, and that there's historical structural inequities within Catholic schools. We know that that they exist and that we must address them. Why? Because they have real negative effects on our community, our students, our faculty and staff, and our parents. So we know that, and we know that it has real life effects. And that this work is so important that it requires a community-wide commitment and support. Again, it's not just the work of one person. Maybe your school doesn't have a designated DI person, so it's something that must become part of the culture and the identity of the school, right? And again, that takes time and that takes effort. That's why I talk parents, students, administration, faculty, PD, events like the summit, continuing to having those conversations even when we're not having a summit on racism. Again, ongoing PD, ongoing formation. That again, I talked about the importance of creating a comprehensive plan and having an equity committee to support the DEI plus A efforts. That's key. Having a plan, however you come to it, you might go through it through a different route, and then having people that will keep each other and keep the school accountable. Okay, and finally, that this the support and commitment from dioceses, parishes, national organizations like the Jesuit School Network, Ignatian Solidarity Network, etc., is crucial, is needed. Having this space right now for us, that the Teach-In has a really evident track to talk about DEI and anti-racism and equity, justice topics is key. And then how do we then continue to have to create this ongoing work and a tide that will lead to changes across the network, not just at our little communities and our context, but throughout. It's part of who we are. It's necessary. It's affecting our constituents, so we need to do it. Thank you very much. That's all I got for you. Thank you very much for bearing with me. This was, again, really strange, but I hope that you find something useful in what I shared with you today. And I will be having a talk back or an opportunity for us to engage. Thank you very much. And again, Carlos Jimenez from Bellarmine College Prep. Thank you very much. Hasta pronto. Gracias.